Across Gaza, only 11 hospitals at the moment are partially, not fully, partially functioning according to the World Health Organization. Richard Peppercorn, who is the World Health Organization's representative in Gaza, said the following. In just 66 days, the health system has gone from 36 functional hospitals to 11 partially functional hospitals. So 1 in the north and 10 in the south. And the reason for that is the aerial bombardments were mostly focused on the northern region of the Gaza Strip. Yes, there were also bombardments happening in the south, but the intense bombardments were focused in the north. Now the IDF is focusing its aerial bombardments mostly in the south. So there really isn't any region of the Gaza Strip that is safe at the moment. And so what remains of the partially functioning hospitals, I don't have a good feeling about what the future holds for them because they're going to continue getting bombarded, and I don't know whether they're going to even be able to offer any medical care at that point. Now, Dr. Hossam Abu-Safia, who is the head of pediatrics at Kamal Adwan Hospital in Gaza City, said that the area where the facility is located saw particularly heavy bombing on Tuesday, followed by the arrival of Israeli troops, describing the situation as very dangerous. He also had another allegation that should absolutely be investigated. It's absolutely terrifying to hear that this is happening. He alleges that Israeli forces are arresting doctors and healthcare workers and that they disappear. No one knows where they're taken to, where they're detained. More than 70 medical staff are arrested and taken to an unknown area, according to Dr. Hossam Abu-Safia, including hospital director Dr. Ahmed Al-Kahlout. Now, in previous reporting, the IDF and the Israeli government seemed to fess up to doing this, and their argument was, well, we need to interrogate them because we have some suspicions that these healthcare workers know where Hamas militants are. And so we just want to ask them some questions. But to me, considering the dire situation in these hospitals, considering the lack of healthcare available to these Palestinian civilians who are wounded through artillery fire and through aerial bombardments, it seems as though this is an attempt to deny people who need healthcare the healthcare they need while detaining these doctors on what I find to be false pretenses, right? They've detained hundreds of Palestinian men, civilians who had absolutely no tie to Hamas. We covered that story earlier this week where they were also releasing footage and photos of these men stripped down to their underwear, absolutely humiliated. By the way, doing that, releasing that kind of footage is also considered a war crime according to international law, which is single-handedly being dismantled by the Israeli government with the help of the United States government. And I have a real problem with that. And so it turned out that later the IDF said that of those men who were in that footage that was spread, right? The men who were stripped to their underwear, only about 10 to 15% of them might have had ties to Hamas militants. But I wouldn't even buy that percentage, right? I wouldn't take anything they say at face value. I would want that to be investigated. In fact, the release of those kinds of videos and the fact they did this, they rounded up hundreds of men and did this to them, I think also needs to be investigated. But it does feel as though the IDF is able to operate with impunity. And the reason why I say that is because you have the United Nations Security Council voting to have Israel engage in a ceasefire. The majority of Security Council countries voted in favor of it, but all you need is one country with veto power to veto that resolution. And that's exactly what the United States did. The United States vetoed the resolution by the UN Security Council to basically force Israel to engage in a ceasefire. After that, there were some moves made, and those moves included the General UN Council voting for a ceasefire. The only problem is, in that case, the resolution is non-binding. It's mostly symbolic, but it's also meant to apply some pressure to Israel. Israel's gonna completely ignore it. So the vote in the 193 member world body was 153 in favor, 10 against, 23 abstentions. Okay, so 23 abstentions. And of course, the United States was among the countries who voted against that ceasefire. So when all of this was taking place, that story of Joe Biden saying that, Benjamin Netanyahu needs to change and that there's indiscriminate bombing taking place in Gaza. He said that as the United States was vetoing or voting against these resolutions in the United Nations for a ceasefire. So it's just really hard for me to really give Biden any credit when you hear this news out of the White House where they're wagging their finger at Netanyahu. By the way, as we know, Biden's White House walked back those statements. White House officials spoke to the Financial Times and made it clear that Biden was just talking off the cuff and it was random, and that in no way is the US government orchestrating some sort of pressure policy to get Benjamin Netanyahu to lay off Gaza and engage in a ceasefire. So that's where we are with the situation. It really is incredibly depressing. I think that it is telling that the United States has engaged in these votes in the UN, first vetoing the UN Security Council and then voting against a broader UN resolution to pressure Israel for a ceasefire. Because think about how that makes the United States look on a world stage. Think about how other countries are now perceiving the United States as we, on one hand, criticize the actions of Vladimir Putin, which we absolutely should, as we on one hand criticize the human rights abuses of other countries, like in China and their treatment of the Uygur Muslims. How can we on one hand have those criticisms while simultaneously enabling the slaughter of tens of thousands of innocent civilians in the Gaza Strip? It's awful, it's shameful, and I'm embarrassed by it.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members, because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us, become a Young Turk.